Hi, everybody. My name is Darlene Rondo, and I'm the Vice President, Best Practices for Leonardo's Online Merchandising Group, and I'm going to be your host for today's event. Welcome to everyone around the globe, and to those who are joining us in the middle of the night, a special thank you. And I can see that there are people here from all over the world. You've been sending in your welcome in the chat box. So thank you. Please continue to send in your questions throughout the webinar for those who have found the questions dialog box. A few housekeeping items before we begin. First, we're going to be recording today's web event, and we'll send you a thank you for joining us email with a link to that recording and the slides. As I just mentioned, you have a questions dialog box in your GoToMeeting panel, and so as we move through our discussion today, please feel free to send in those questions and we'll address them throughout our webinar, as well as at the end of the presentation if we have any time left over. Our educational programs are changing, and today's event is a good example of how we're evolving. Our events going forward will be on camera with more casual discussion among presenters, and we'll continue to find fun and meaningful ways to get more audience involvement as well. We're also going to be tweeting during today's webinar, so please join in the conversation at #LeoWebinar. Now I'd like to introduce our special guest for today's event, Tim Peter. Tim is the founder of Tim Peter & Associates, an agency that provides expert advice and training in digital marketing. Tim's worked with hotels, travel providers, and tech partners alike to create comprehensive marketing and customer services solution. Prior to launching Tim Peter & Associates in 2011, so I guess that's about 5 years ago.
5.5.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
He worked with the world's largest hotel franchisor and independent luxury hotel rep firm to achieve billions of dollars in revenue, profitability, and to significantly reduce costs. Tim's work on Charles Schwab's digital customer service initiatives won him the company's Rookie of the Year award. Tim's recent efforts include helping clients develop strategic digital marketing plans, detailed content personalization strategies, improved on-site customer service offerings, and leading comprehensive digital transformations. It really sounds exhausting, Tim.
It makes the days go by quickly, Darlene, that's for
Yeah.
sure.
And what blows me away is that, and in your spare time, you also teach digital marketing strategy and operation for Rutgers Business School and NYU School of Continuing and Professional Studies. So your days are jam-packed for sure. To get started, I'd like to tee up 3 polls to get a better sense of who's in our audience today and what is top of mind for everyone. So with that, the first poll I'd like to launch is where are you located? So if you would just check the radio box that most closely resembles where you're located. So you're in North America, EMEA, Asia Pacific, or Latin America. So it looks like by and large, the majority of our audience is located in North America, 69%. So yeah, great. Thanks everybody for weighing in. Appreciate that.
Excuse me.
And now we are going to go to our next poll, which is, what are you going to focus on in 2017? Are you going to focus on social, mobile, organic search, the basics, or you don't really have a specific focus? And this will help us in a couple of ways. It'll help sort of guide our discussion today, and will also help to us as we develop our educational materials. So it looks like the majority of folks are going to be focused on social, followed closely by organic at about 40%, and then the basics. And we're going to talk about all of these things today. So again, thank you for sharing that. And then the last poll that we'd like to launch is this the first time that you're attending a Leonardo webinar? And again, this helps us understand who's in our audience today. And so, wow, I'm a little surprised that 65% of you, this is your first time attending. So, Tim, no pressure. We have to do a fabulous job for everybody today.
Well,
So,
Darlene, I have no doubt that you will, and I'll certainly do my best to keep up.
well, thanks, Tim. And as I said, we're going to make this event today interactive. And so Tim and I will be having, it'll be more like a conversation as opposed to a presentation, if you will. So as the title of today's webinar suggests, we're going to be discussing the four major digital marketing trends for 2017. And I think that discussion begins by starting with the basics. That is the fundamentals of your digital marketing strategy. All properties, regardless of whether you're branded, independent, small, large, everyone has revenue targets for 2017, and most, if not everyone on the call today, will have a strategy in place already for how to achieve those goals. It might be to drive more direct bookings, acquire new customers, increase your ADR, or something else. Whatever your strategy, I would suggest that they tie directly to the four trends that Tim and I are going to share with you today, and pardon me, the tactics you use should do the same, especially given the growing market share of intermediaries. In February, just sort of set the stage, TripAdvisor extended the instant booking functionality on its website to 9 more countries, further strengthening its position as a major third-party booking channel. Then in July, we saw Expedia acquire the travel app Trover, which specializes in geotargeting, publishing, and sharing travel photography, which demonstrates Expedia's intention to really start to drill down on the travel inspiration part of the journey. Google continues to grow its travel business, launching Book on Google for desktop, which is really an evolution of the Google Wallet that allows people signed into their Google accounts to seamlessly book and buy hotel rooms across platforms. And then in September, Google also launched the new personalized travel planner app, Google Trips, which helps track and organize your travel itinerary and making suggestions for things to do. Just last week, Google revamped the hotel ads product on its website, making it easier for you to get started with that advertising program. A metasearch product that helps travel shoppers find hotels and search prices within that search engine without having to navigate to a separate website, aka your website. So this is all on top of the continued battles that hoteliers face with OTAs, which continue to grow in market share. In 2016, OTAs accounted for more than 40% of all hotel bookings in the US, almost 70% in Europe, and around 65% in Asia Pacific. This doesn't mean that the game is lost yet against these online travel giants, as it often does. It comes back to being bullish on fundamentals. The basics of marketing, whether online or offline, are the same. The tools may be different. And when I think of the basics, I imagine being an owner of the general store in a small town or village of, say, 500 people, where everyone knows most everyone, and Tim is smiling because I think he knows where I'm going with this. In my store, my general store, I know my customers well. I know their age, their gender, where they're from, what they do for a living, what they buy or don't buy in my store, and what they spend. I know who their families are, how often they come in, what kind of vehicle they drive, and so on. And because I know all this, I know how and what to sell to them. Now, the general store analogy clearly is an extreme example, but the same approach applies using some simple and some sophisticated technology to analyze the data and then to promote and merchandise your hotels to secure more direct bookings. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Tim, and Tim's going to talk more about the fundamentals. Tim?
Yeah. So one of the things that I want to build on, as Darlene was just saying, so much of this really comes down to knowing your guests and doing what's right by your guests. You know, loyalty ain't all it's cracked up to be. When we talk about loyalty programs in this industry, a lot of times we talk about a points program. We talk about a rewards program. And realistically, there are over 3 billion loyalty memberships in the United States. Now, that's a country with a population of roughly 350 million people, meaning that most people actually participate in 10 separate rewards programs, somewhere between 9 and 10 separate rewards programs. That's not loyalty. That's you're paying me to come and visit you. You're paying me when I come and stay. And it's clearly important that you have access to those guests, and it's clearly important that you pay attention to those guests from that perspective. But we also need to think in terms of recognition. We need to think in terms of what are we doing that actually helps us understand who these people are, who these guests are, the needs that they have when they come and stay with us, and how we can best meet their needs most effectively. For instance, do you happen to know that the guest who is staying in room 315 is there on his anniversary, with his wife, and they have very different needs than the family that's traveling in room 425 who has a vegan daughter and has very restrictive needs or is gluten-free from a dietary perspective, from how you handle them on an F&B perspective? We don't do a good enough job of that and are creating opportunities for people to come in and disrupt what we do as hoteliers, what we do in the hospitality space of meeting those needs. If you think about what Uber does with Uber Eats and instant delivery, if we look at some of the things that Booking.com is doing and that Expedia is doing in terms of actually getting deeper into the service delivery area once people are on property, we're kind of setting ourselves up for the same level of disruption we've seen in the booking path once guests are already on property. And that's a really concerning thing, right?
Yeah.
Because we've already had them take a big chunk of the booking path. Now they want to get deeper into the entire guest life cycle. I know many of you are probably familiar with Alice, which is a terrific platform that enables people to actually track what's happening from a customer service basis once somebody's on property. And it tracks the requests, it tracks how quickly you've responded, and if in fact the people in your property aren't responding quickly enough, Alice will actually contact you at the hotel to get you to respond faster. That sounds great, right? Okay, except that you're outsourcing guest experience to a third party. Also, one of the largest investors in Alice is Expedia. And so we're not just outsourcing guest service to a third party, but we're outsourcing guest service to a third party that is also an OTA. And that suddenly can turn a hotel into just a box of rooms. And that's a really, really dangerous position to put yourself into in terms of how you're going to be able to compete with what's happening in the marketplace. So if you want to get digital right, I mean, when we talk about digital and we talk about digital strategy, first you need to focus on your overall strategy and what do you need to do to serve the needs of the guest most appropriately. And, if you want to look at who's doing it well, I would look at our next slide where we have people like Airbnb, who's doing a tremendous job of this. I know people talk about Airbnb all the time, as how they can hurt or how they can disrupt. But I want to read a quote from the co-founder and chief product officer, Joe Gebbia, who said, "We didn't come up with anything new. Hospitality has been around forever, and there are many websites like ours. Why did ours take off? Luck and timing aside, what I've learned is we can understand the components of trust and design for that. Trust is still and will always be the foundation of our company, and one of my main objectives has been to find new ways to understand and innovate all aspects of trust in our service, our company, and our community." So just this week over at Airbnb is holding a conference in LA right now, and they're launching their City Hosts product, where they're actually selling experiences in the city that are curated by somebody who's a local. Somebody who actually can tell you the best place to surf, the best place to shop, the best place to go drink, the best place to see music, etc. Call me crazy, that sounds a lot like a concierge, right? Like a customized concierge. And that's a company that doesn't own any rooms, doesn't own any hotels, but is focused on what is the experience we want guests to have. And as hoteliers, we need to be able to tell that story as well. Storytelling is going to be core to what we do in 2017, focusing on having the right content that tells guests why they should visit not just your property, but also your area, your village, to use Darlene's approach to this, is going to be really, really critical. And I think we're seeing these folks do a terrific job of it, and we as hoteliers need to do a similar kind of thing.
So Tim, this begs a question. You've worked for big brands. You know, brands are seemingly removed from the local scene, right? And so what's your guidance to brands on how to tell those stories like Airbnb is doing, or like a lot of independent and small boutique hotels on property? They're able to tell their stories really, really well because they're on the ground in that location. How can a brand sort of compete?
Sure. So first off, I would look to people like Marriott. I mean, what Marriott is doing with its content studio, I think, is really terrific. They've made some great strides there. I think if you look at what people like Wyndham are doing in terms of sourcing content directly from franchisees, again, that's a really good idea. They have to do a great job of connecting with who are the local experts in market who can help them build out that content more effectively. And if you're a franchisee, I used to work for a large franchisor, right? If you're a franchisee, you should look to fill in the gaps. What are the things that you can talk about that, that the corporation just isn't well equipped to talk about? How can you actually fill in those gaps in the space where the information doesn't exist? Even if you're a select service property, maybe you don't have the best location or things like that, you're near to things. You're along the way to things. So there's always something you can talk about that separates, if not your property specifically, certainly the region you're in, the area you're in, and why you're a good choice as people are passing through that area, right? Customers care a lot about proximity. How close are you to the things, not just location, but immediately how close are you to the things they care about most? Use that to your advantage. Talk, if you're close to local business, to regional headquarters for large corporations and the like, talk about how convenient you are to those office parks for your business travelers. If you're along the I-95 corridor, talk about why you're a great place to stop as people drive between New York and Orlando or things along those lines. And how convenient you are to food, how convenient you are to other amenities, how convenient you are to those other sorts of things. That's what I would really encourage hotels to take ownership of, and work with the brands to say, great, you focus on the things you can do well, we'll focus on the things we can do well, and work in partnership rather than trying to talk about exactly the same thing every time.
Yeah, right on. And here's your next slide, but I just want to say as it comes up. So I found this new Netflix only miniseries, The Crown, and I'm like, sure. Yeah, it's like I'm binge watching it as much as I can. So anyway, I love this slide of yours.
Right. Fundamentally, this to me is the ¡1 rule for how we go forward, which is content is king. You've heard it before. It's been beaten to death. But the reason it is because it's true. Content is king. Guests have questions they need answered, and your content needs to answer those questions for them. Increasingly, though, context is queen. It's equally important, and it's where are guests in their journey. And I don't just mean their travel journey, but I mean their travel discovery, their journey to discover where they want to stay and what they want to do while they're there. And so you need to understand, where are they at that phase of the journey? What device are they using? Right? Are they just looking for quick questions while they're sitting in their car, or they're sitting there on their mobile phone picking their kids up from soccer practice, and so they have a very fast thing? Then you need to serve the content in a way that is very bite-sized, very consumable. I always think of it in terms of being what I call snackable, shareable, and sharp. So something that they can snack on, they can get really quickly and easily. That's sharp, it's very focused and to the point of answering the question. And shareable, so that they can email it or text it to the other people that they're traveling with and say, oh, this is what I was talking about last night. Check this out. And you do a great job of that, you're going to do a really good job of actually getting people to come back to you and book.
Excellent. And just as an aside, Katia from our audience just wrote in that she just started watching The Crown and she's happy to hear that it's worth continuing to watch. So, so everyone from the audience, a good reminder, there is a questions dialog box in your GoToMeeting panel, so please feel free to send in comments and questions as Tim and I move through the discussion today. So let's move on to the second trend of our discussion, which is mobile. This year at Leonardo, you heard us talk a lot about mobile in our webinars and on our blogs, and that's because mobile is permanently embedded in the life of a hotel shopper. And as a result, hotels who want to win the direct booking clearly have to have a very good mobile presence. This industry saw more than 25% year-over-year growth in mobile searches in the last year, 18 months or so. And in the past 12 months, conversion rates on mobile travel sites have grown 88%. Now that's the entire travel industry, not just hotels. So clearly travelers are shifting to this mobile first experience, and if that's not enough to convince you to care about mobile, then this should. Google, and Tim can chime in here as well, Google is doing absolutely everything it can to cater to mobile. In April of this year, it announced that it would be rewarding mobile-friendly websites with higher rankings in mobile search results. And then in October, it took it a step further, announcing that it's going to be switching to mobile-first indexing in the coming months. And
actually, if I can jump in there for 1 second, Darlene, one thing to be aware is 100% of the growth in mobile search volume is occurring on mobile. If we look at desktop search volumes over the last couple of years, they're actually down as a share of the total search volumes that are occurring. Fewer and fewer people are searching on desktop; they're searching on mobile. I'm going to contradict Darlene for 1 second. She can kick me later. But I don't think mobile's a trend. I think it's a way of life. It's how our customers simply live. It is no longer the alternate screen or the second screen. In some cases, it's the only screen. We just did some research for a client we're working with and found that about 30% of their customers that they interact with on a regular basis only use mobile to go online. They don't have a computer of any kind in their home other than their mobile device. And so that's a huge, huge reality, huge shift.
Yeah, absolutely, Tim. And the other thing, and Mary Meeker wrote about this earlier this year, and it's about voice search. And as voice search becomes more sophisticated, we're going to see, I think, mobile searching really, you just described the growth. It's really going to explode when we get our arms around that.
Can I try something real quick? This might not work. This is unscripted, folks. This is something that I was recently in a meeting, and literally one of the folks in the meeting, every search that individual did was done on mobile and was done via speech. So I'm going to give this a try. Hopefully this will work. Hopefully my microphone will pick it up. But okay, Google, who is the President of the United States?
Presidents of the United States of America include Barack Obama, George W. Bush, Bill Clinton, and others.
Okay, Google, who is his wife?
Barack Obama has been married to Michelle Obama since 1992.
Okay. So hopefully you all heard that. Notice the second request was not who is Barack Obama's wife. It was who is his wife. So the guest
Smart.
experience, customer experience, is getting so much more responsive and so much more just having a dialogue. We're going to see a lot of change in this over the next couple of years.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I love that you did that. That was perfect. And it worked.
That's always a plus. You never know when you try these things live whether or not you're going
I
to get the
know.
right response.
I know. That's why we're on the cutting edge, Jim.
But the key point I would take to this is clearly what you're going to need to do to make that work for your property. I mean, to make this practical is you have to turn this into having the right content that will answer those questions. That's why content is king. If you don't have the right content, there's nothing in search that will find you. And if you ask, Google, hey, show me the best hotel near me or near where I'm traveling to, the answers that come back are going to be driven heavily by that content. That's why that's so critical.
Absolutely. That's an excellent point. And, so we're talking about mobile, right? As of January 2017, content that's not easily accessible on a mobile page isn't going to rank as highly. And here's some examples on the screen. Intrusive pop-ups that are shown as you land on a mobile page are going to be penalized with lower rankings. We wrote a blog all about this topic if you want more information after the program, but I can't stress this enough. If you haven't already gotten ahead of that, you need to do it this year because it's seriously going to affect your organic search traffic in 2017. And I'm going to turn this back over to Tim to continue.
Sure. So one of the things you have to be aware, this is one of my all-time favorite quotes. Darren Houston, who was the Priceline CEO at the time, said, that they really looked at people who were doing research on desktop, doing research on tablet, showing up on property with a mobile device, and that they looked to say that a Booking.com account would be the thing that tied all of those together. And Darren said, I think a mobile in the short term is a positive to drive some bookings, but really in the long term, it is increasing our value to the customer that would be very difficult for an independent hotel to do. The OTAs and the intermediaries are really looking at mobile as the glue that ties that guest experience together at every step in the journey. And as hoteliers, we cannot cede that ground to them. We cannot just give up and say, we can't do that. There are plenty of tools that exist. There are plenty of techniques that exist. Having the right content helps in terms of making sure that when guests reach for their phone and reach for those queries and do the things that they're doing to find the answers to the questions that they need, that you're what gets found. That's really critical. As we look at the next slide, one of the things that I thought this was great. This is actually near to my home. I didn't make this up. This isn't photoshopped. This is a church that's saying, hear the good news, we are a Polka Stop, right? They recognize this is how critical mobile has become to people's lives. We need to actually get people to come in and see us and things along those lines. Now, I don't think a Polka Stop is necessarily the right way to do it for your hotel, but it's an acknowledgement of this is how our guests live their lives today. It's just what they take for granted. Now, what I think is... Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
No, I was just wondering whether you found that on Google Images or whether that was a real-life experience.
This is a real-life experience. This is a few miles away from my home. I was driving along. I saw it. I pulled off to the side of the road, and I took a picture. That's not on Google Images. That's a Tim Peter original. And it's just the reality of the fact that people expect this kind of thing everywhere they go, even on their day of rest. But if we go to the next slide, one thing I would point to, this is another stirring image to me. Now, I recognize this didn't end up the way that Mrs. Clinton would have liked, but nonetheless, the first time I saw this photo, it took me a moment to get what was happening here.
Yeah.
Right? And what's happening, of course, is everyone in the picture is taking a selfie of a presidential candidate.
Yeah.
When we talk about content, when we talk about how you can get content, don't forget that every single one of your guests is carrying a high definition video camera with them, is carrying a high definition photography camera with them, is carrying the entire internet in their pocket. Look towards the things that can help you source content from your guests, because they actually can help you reach a much wider audience than you can reach on your own. It becomes
And
so
they
critical.
help,
Say again?
you know, and they help you tell your story. And
Absolutely.
yeah, right. I often hear from hotels, particularly hotels who think that they don't really have a story because maybe they're limited service or they're on the side of a highway, or, your guests are rich with the stories of your property.
Absolutely. And it's great because they're actually talking about what they did and what they enjoyed about it. I always use this example, really, really quick math. If you have a 100-room hotel that runs at 60% occupancy and you host 1.4 guests per room each night, right? That's about 31,000 guests a year you can
Right.
have tell your story on your behalf. Now, here's the best part about that. The average person on social media connects to about 200 folks, right? Which means that they can reach anywhere between 4.5 and 8.5 million people on your behalf all year
Right.
long.
Yeah.
That's hugely important. And
Yeah.
they're carrying the devices with them to actually capture that story and tell that story on your behalf. That's huge and so critical to being a way you can source that content.
Absolutely. That's a great segue into the next trend where we're going to talk about search and SEO. And this year, we actually saw the effectiveness of paid search start to wear off a little.
Mm-hmm.
According to Christian Camille, who's the CEO of NoGDS, which is a platform that connects hotels and airlines directly to professional sellers of travel, what they said was that the average travel-related click on Google AdWords now costs about $2.20 US, but the conversion rates have dropped to about 1.45%. So this declining performance doesn't seem to bother the likes of Priceline and Expedia. They each spend somewhere around $3 billion in online advertising every year. But for most hoteliers, it is a concern. And so we need to see a better return on investment to justify the expense of these marketing programs. The good news is that there are smart alternatives to traditional online advertising. One that comes to mind is the programmatic advertising that Sojourn does, and they talked about it. We had a digital summit last month. They talked about programmatic advertising, and it's well worth, I think, in investigating.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's so many things you can do there. We'll talk about this in a moment when I get to my slide, but you want to think about where search fits into the overall journey and how you make it work more effectively for you. I'll give you an example in just a moment.
Yeah, from an organic search perspective, hotel marketers can be smarter. We can all be smarter. Search engine optimization really has changed a great deal over the last few years. It's no longer about keyword stuffing and using exact search terms because people don't search this way anymore. Earlier this year, Google made an important update to one of its 200 plus algorithms, Penguin. And Penguin is designed to lower the rankings of websites that use what is called black hat SEO techniques to try and artificially raise their rankings. And so things like keyword stuffing and manipulating the number of backlinks to a web page. With this new update, Penguin data is now refreshed and it's done in real time and is much more granular. And so this is good news for websites that actually follow good SEO practices and produce high quality content, but it's bad news for those websites who are still trying to find a loophole and a shortcut in their SEO strategies. So I know, Tim, you're going to talk more about this.
Yeah, it's just a really simple thing, right? We need to focus more in terms of what is the cost of a reservation rather than what is a cost per click, right? And thinking in terms of how do those clicks actually lead to reservations? So some quick math for you. We don't have a poll, but I just want you to think about this in your head. If you have a scenario where the cost per click is 10 cents and the conversion rate is 1%, or you have a scenario where the cost per click is $1 and the conversion rate is 10%, most people would look at those and go, well, I would assume the 10 cents is better. But the reality is the cost per conversion is precisely the same, right? I realize I'm showing these in euros, but the reality is it doesn't matter if it's euros, it doesn't matter if it's dollars.
We're an international audience, Tim.
Exactly, exactly. It doesn't matter if it's euros, doesn't matter if it's dollars. What is that as a percentage of your revenue? That's what you really want to look for. The other thing you have to recognize is that maybe the right terms for you to buy are higher funnel and are going to convert worse, but they're going to bring people back to book later on things like your organic terms. I use this all the time. I had a client who, when I first started working with them, they were getting 70% of their traffic from search from organic terms. And they said, that's great, right? And I said, no, that's terrible. Because it means that the only people who are finding you are people who've already heard of you.
Right.
Right? When you're an independent property, your name may not be that famous. And if you're getting lots and lots and lots of traffic from organic terms, from branded terms, it means that people are finding you somewhere else first, right, or you're not reaching people who've never heard of you at all. And that's a really dangerous place to be. So it's
maybe they're finding you on an OTA, which would be called the billboard effect. But according to some people, the billboard effect is dead. What do you think?
And I will tell you, the billboard effect, I'm sort of on the fence about that one. I believe that the billboard effect both never existed and always existed. And I believe that the billboard effect doesn't work, is dead and is still alive for the people it works for. I think it varies widely, and I think the data shows that it varies pretty widely by hotel. What is important about that research, and this is so obvious, I think it's being overlooked, is when people start on an OTA, they tend to book on an OTA. When people start on a property site or on a brand site, they tend to book on that property site or brand site more often. Right? Meaning that this is the part that's kind of obvious and might sound a little stupid, but what you should take away from that is if they never visit your site, they're never going to book on your site, right? So you have to get them to your site in the first place. You have to look at ways to say, how can we drive more traffic to our site? Because those are the folks who become the universe of people we can actually close on our site. And search may be one way to do it, but there are probably other tools that are better for driving just raw volumes of traffic, and then using things like retargeting in search to target people who visited your site previously. You can be smarter about how you use search to actually close the sale. And I think the next trend we're going to talk about is one of the ways you can actually drive traffic more cheaply and is well worth looking at.
Yeah, thanks for that segue. And as you pointed out with mobile, social media is not a trend either. So I'm going to just take that hit right up front. Katya in our audience has a comment. She's saying that there are a lot of people who there's a reverse billboard effect. So they go to the property site first, then they go to the OTA to book because there's this perception that maybe they're going to get a better deal on the OTA.
Yeah, and Katya, you are absolutely correct, and for that, hoteliers we have no one to blame but ourselves. I am still a proponent of rate parity. I know there's a lot of talk of closed user groups and the like, and they certainly have their place if they're a truly closed user group. But we've spent decade plus teaching guests that if they keep shopping, they'll find a better deal somewhere. And when you don't have rate parity, you're just reinforcing that reality. So if people go to the OTA and they find a better deal, and I see this all the time
Right.
with hotels when I'm traveling, where that's true, then you've just proved to the guest that that's exactly what they should do. So I have one tiny piece of advice. Stop it. Don't do that. You're just making it harder for yourself to convince people to book with you directly.
Yeah, like that old adage, if it hurts when you do that, don't do that.
Right, exactly. Why do you hit yourself in the head with a hammer? Well, because it feels so good when I stop. Maybe we shouldn't do that in the first place, right?
Yeah, yeah. Good stuff. And we're going to look at the final focus for 2017 social media. So we also saw some significant changes in this area this year, most notably Facebook's update to its newsfeed algorithm, which now favors content posted by friends and family. And the side effect of those changes is that the content posted by publishers or businesses, hotels, shows up less prominently in the news feeds, which results in significantly less referral traffic to your website. So why bother with social at all? And I think the answer is because it's still super relevant, right? According to this new Skiff report, 70% of travelers are likely to share, and you talked about this before, Tim, share their holiday pictures on social media. And, you know, your stats were really impressive. And, you know, the math that we did, just one single post shared 3 times can reach up to 10,000 people. So clearly this this medium is super influential. According to Internet Marketing, half of Facebook users said their friends' photos inspired their travel plans. So it will continue to be important. And I don't think yet we have solved the problem of figuring out how to use it most effectively. I see some hotels around the globe who are doing a terrific job, but by and large, I think we're still trying to figure it out and justify our efforts on social to management, because I think there's this expectation that there's a one-to-one between my activity on Facebook and a booking, and it's not always that easy.
Right. Yeah, we have to think about where people are in the customer journey specifically, right? And realistically, social is probably more of a top of funnel activity. It is something that you're going to get people earlier in the process, but again, that's going to lead them to your site in the first place. And as I said a moment ago, if they never get to your site, they're never going to book on your site. So it's really important to think about it in those terms.
And
now,
Tim, before you launch into this, Ricardo in the audience has a comment / question. He's saying, you know, Expedia is offering a point system now. So even with rate parity, he's saying they have this added incentive to earn points for future stays. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, well, again, I think this is where it gets back to recognition over rewards, right? If we're paying our guests to stay with us, somebody else can always come along with more money and buy that loyalty, right? Yeah. Instead, if you focus on what are the perks, what are the benefits of people booking directly, how do we actually recognize people who are our best customers, that's where you can have a true closed user group. If you have people who are truly good customers because you have the right CRM data that says, yeah, these are the folks who stay with us most regularly, offer them a special offer, a special reward, a special discount, a special deal, maybe a friends and family kind of thing that they can share on your behalf. But it doesn't have to be rate driven. It can be what's an amenity they receive upon arrival. What's a, you know, preferred seating in the restaurant or preferred seating at, you know, meal times in the restaurant or things like that. Putting together the right kind of packages that say, let's do a value add promotion, but only for our very best customers that gets them tickets to an event or tickets to something else going on in your area that, you know, is an actually attractive offer. Those work tremendously well, and they make the rate opaque so people don't see the fact that, you know, maybe there is a discount there. They don't get this level set of, oh, it's going to be cheaper than next time I just book room only. That's what you have to be able to do.
And I know you're going to talk about this, and Uruj in the audience is also asking, how do you increase room reservations using social? So,
Yeah, what a great segue. Thank you, Arush. So this is something that I would look at, for instance, in terms of paid social, where we can actually do custom audiences and target people who've actually visited specific pages on my website. So they've been into the booking path. I might have a special promotion that I offer them, or a special ad that I present to them, versus people who've been to other parts of the website. I can have customized content for them, versus people who've never been to my website at all. I can have customized content for them. So it's really about looking at, again, context is queen. What's the right content to show them based on their past experiences with my hotel's website? And it's really thinking about that perspective. Also look at it in terms of top of funnel. How can you drive more traffic? Now, this is something I expect we will see this coming year. This exists today in the retail environment,
right.
but not in the hotel environment, but I suspect strongly we will see this in 2017. So one of the things that Facebook is doing now is, if you see an ad on Facebook, you're exposed to an ad on Facebook, and then you show up in a retail location and are logged into the Facebook app, they can actually close the loop to say, yeah, that ad actually influenced people to visit the retail location. And so we're going to be able to track conversion in maybe a different way than we have in the past. That somebody might see an ad on Facebook, be exposed to an ad on Facebook, but book through your website, book through voice, show up property direct, or maybe even book through an OTA, but because they've shown up on property logged into the Facebook app, we'll be able to connect the dots and say, yeah, those ads absolutely helped influence people to show up in your hotel later, and can actually help you uncover the hidden ROI of social advertising today that gets a little lost because it tends to get people when they're up here rather than when they're this close to the booking. So this is going to be the way we're going to tie this together. And again, they're doing this for retail today, but we'll probably see that in 2017. I'm pretty confident we'll see it in 2017 for hotels.
And I think, Tim, this question, I'll tee it up now. This is from Aubrey, and they're saying, in my experience, and this person is running a B&B, no one is looking at them on Facebook or social media. So if I advertise on social media, how do I spark interest when they see it out of nowhere? How do you get them to your site to book when they weren't even looking in the first place?
This is a great question. This is a great question.
It is.
So the first part of this is, Aubrey, I'd ask you to reframe your thinking on this a little bit. One of the things that we've done very badly in the hospitality industry, and I will absolutely raise my hand and say I'm guilty because I've talked about it for years, is we talk about getting the guest to book. And obviously we want a reservation to result, but when we think about social, frequently you need to get them earlier than the booking. You haven't even introduced yourself, so you can't get them to book. What you can get them to do is visit your website. What you can get them to do is learn more about your destination or your location. That will then subsequently lead to a book that might come through organic search because they searched for the name of your B&B after having found your website through social. So it's looking at the ROI models in a slightly different way to say, are we generating traffic, and is that traffic that ultimately converts? So I'd look at it a slightly different way. Instead of thinking about how do we get them to book through social, it's how do we get them to actually find us through social, and then how do we turn that traffic into bookings?
Yeah, I think there are always two parts of that equation. People have to find you,
right,
and they have to create awareness that you exist. And then the other part is, once that piece is complete, the other part is, what do you do with them once they get to your store?
Right. And actually, if we can go back one slide, I know we're going a little bit late on time here, but if we can go back for one slide for 1 second. Aubrey, this is a very specific example of showing ads only to people who visited part of your booking engine. So here they've said they've been on a specific page on the website, and then we're going to go ahead and show ads to those people. So this could be a second ad that people see after they've been to your website in the first place, where you are getting the social to actually drive the booking, but first you have to get them to the site in the first place. So it's just thinking about it more holistically to say, where are they in the journey, what is their appropriate context, and how do we make that context work for them so that it actually works.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I just wanted to close. I know I've said this a couple times, but content is still the king. We've talked about mobile, we've talked about social, we've talked about search. Realistically, if you don't have content, your guests have nothing to search on, and they have nothing to share on social. So content is absolutely the king, because otherwise you simply don't appear. But also context is queen, because we need to say, if they're at a different part in the journey, we might need to talk about something else other than book now, but rather come and discover us, come and learn about us, and then hit them with the things that you can say, now book with us.
And Tim, I would add that in terms of context, it is about where they are in the journey. It's also about what device they're using at that point, right? So
Absolutely.
which is why, going back to one of the other focuses for 2017 mobile, right? So I'm going to behave differently if I'm, at home watching TV and I'm searching for stuff than I would if I'm on the subway.
Right, absolutely right. Yeah, you raise a great point. I've said for years that mobile's not a device, it's a situation.
Yeah.
If I'm on my mobile phone, and people do this all the time, Darlene, you hit it right on the head. If I'm sitting on the couch binge watching The Crown, and I happen to have my phone in my hands at that moment, I'm going to have a very different expectation of if I'm, in a cab on the way to the airport, or if I'm on the subway, or things along those lines. And you need to target your content effectively in those different situations to actually answer people's questions.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a few more questions, Tim. People seem to be hanging with us, so I am going to tee up a couple more questions in a second. I'm going to launch a couple more polls, though, before we continue. We'd like to know from the audience, which topic would you like to learn more about next year, so that as we develop our marketing calendar, we know what assets to produce and which topics to focus on. So, wow. Surprising. I don't know why I'm surprised, but social media is coming up around 70%, and then followed by content marketing and mobile. So yeah, cool. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate that. And then I'm going to launch one last poll. Based on what you've heard today, will you join us for a future web event? And as I said up front, these are going to continue to be more visual, where we'll have people on webcam and much more interactive like you heard today. So please weigh in and let us know what you thought of today's events. And it looks like the majority of folks, by and large, really like what they heard. And so thank you. We appreciate your feedback. That helps us a great deal. And before we take a couple of last questions, Tim, I want to be sure and thank you, Tim Peter from Tim Peter and Associates. Excellent best practices and insights for each of the 4 topics that we talked about today, which was the fundamentals, mobile, social, and search. And as I said, lots of questions to tee up. Just 30 seconds about Visly. Aligning yourself with the right tools is going to be key, as it always is. It's going to be key in 2017 as well, and at Leonardo, we're proud to have a solution that addresses the challenges that we talked about in today's discussion and the objectives that people want to achieve. Visly is a multi-channel digital marketing system that is actually designed for hotels, B&Bs, and inns to better manage your digital marketing. It's a cloud-based technology where you can create, publish, update, and maintain visually stunning hotel websites, mobile sites, Facebook apps, and digital brochures. So it's in a central system. You have a hotel website that has been purpose-built to drive conversions and increase bookings, and you can easily manage all your digital marketing without any special technical skills and replacing the need to hire an expensive agency or to have long turnaround times to make those updates for you. So there's a low monthly subscription fee to sign up for Visly, and more than 4,000 hotels around the world are now using it. So you can learn more at visly.com. And so a couple more questions, and there was one from Kathy, and it's on the subject of Twitter. Tim, how important do you think Twitter is for a small property? And in this case, Kathy is from a B&B, but I guess we could just answer the question, how important is Twitter, period?
So Twitter is complicated, right? It's probably not terribly important in terms of driving guest behavior directly. What Twitter does do a really good job of is connecting you with influencers, so potentially bloggers and writers and folks along those lines, reporters for local papers or local papers in the feeder markets for your B&B, that there can be value in terms of getting your content in front of those folks who can then share with the people who would ultimately be your guests through their other channels like blogs and Facebook and Instagram and things along those lines. So it's not that it's unimportant. It's important about how you think about using it and what your objectives are for Twitter. And to me, it's a way of getting your content in front of the people who can get it in front of your guests. But you have to kind of shape how you use that way a little bit differently.
Yeah, I like that angle of using it for promotion to local media. I think that's a great way to, similarly as we talked about with Facebook, right? You
Right.
share one post and that can, extrapolate to an awful lot of people. Same concept, right?
Yeah, exactly. And the thing I would think about is, there's the old joke about, not the old joke, there's the old Andy Warhol quote that was, in the future, everyone will be famous for 15 minutes.
Yeah.
The way that I look at it these days is actually in the future, everyone will be famous to 15 people. And so what you want to think about is, when we talk about local media might be a blogger who happens to talk about, things that are relevant to your guests. So if you're a B&B and you're in I'm going to completely make this up, but you're in a Civil War battleground, there could be a blogger who's very influential amongst people who care about that kind of thing, who is on Twitter, and if you can talk about your connection to that channel, you can suddenly reach a really valuable audience for your potential guests using that person. We've just seen it. I don't mean this to be, not to get political, but I mean, if you look at the way the candidates have used Twitter and look at niche publications to get the word out to the people who are most likely to be their audience, that's really effective, and it's a great model to steal from, frankly.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Tim, and thanks, audience. Great questions. Don't miss next month's web event. It will be our final event for 2016, and we're going to be discussing the science behind a great website that converts. And we're going to have Naveen Nawaz, who is one of our product managers at Leonardo. She's going to break down the critical elements of a hotel website to lead travel shoppers down that booking path. And I know as a product designer, she's going to have some really interesting perspective on the science of all of this. And so don't miss that, December 8th. And as always, thank you very much, Tim. always entertaining and informative. So we really appreciate you being with us today.
It's my pleasure, Darlene. Thanks so much for having me.
And again, thank you, audience, for joining us for today's event. As I often say, Thursday is the new Friday, so have a great rest of your day or start of your weekend, whatever the case may be. So we'll see you next time. Thanks, everybody.